Roy, I have this feeling that free will is a really important, it's a big question, but I want to ask myself why. So I speak to philosophers, neuroscientists, and you as a social psychologist. How do you look upon free will and why is it a big question?
One of psychology's main jobs is to explain behavior. I think of free will as a new kind of controlling and producing behavior, a new system or a new inner process that produces behavior that was produced by evolution, but that sets us apart from other creatures. Um, we have basic desires the same as they do. Every animal gets hungry, and when it gets hungry, it wants to eat. We do that too, but we might refrain from eating because we're on a diet, or it's a religious holiday, or the food belongs to someone else, or all these other things that might not matter to other creatures. So, importing these ideas and meanings creates different possibilities and enables us to change our behavior based on these things.
It seems then free will, from a human perspective, really cuts really deep to what it means to be human.
I think so, yes. Free will is one of the basic human traits. I think that's why, too, some people are going around saying there's no such thing as free will, it's an illusion, blah, blah, blah. I think people are upset by that, partly because it denies one of the basic facts of human experience.
Well, philosophers and neuroscientists each have their own views and each have very careful definitions and careful structures of the world. And I think what you're saying is, okay, let them do what they want. I'm dealing with the reality of how we behave in the real world and human beings. And we have these expressions of free will, these behavioral expressions. And how do we understand that?
Yes, a philosopher is trying to sharpen up the concepts and so on. My goal as a research psychologist is to figure out what is the real process, what happens inside the mind and so forth that produces the behavior. I'm assuming the idea of free will has social value. It's important. It corresponds to some real phenomenon. Maybe some philosophers would say, well, that's not really free will or doesn't fit this and that definition. They may be right. But to me, I want to understand what that real process is and what makes it different from other ways of behaving.
Okay, so let's begin to disaggregate it. What do you see as components of it, or what are some of the elements of free will that give it that character?
I got into studying free will by virtue of my research on self-control. We had found that self-control seems to depend on a limited kind of energy, that it takes strength, it's tied into the body's energy system and so forth. Self-control is difficult, so it depletes some energy, and after that, you're not as good at self-control until you replenish. When we found that the same energy is also used for decision-making and initiative, and I said, okay, well, this is bigger than self-control. There's some common energy basis that's used for all these things. That's when we started talking about free will. But the common theme is that I presume evolution through nature found a way to take the body's energy, translate it by means presumably of brain activities and so on into a new ways of controlling behavior that are much more suited for living in culture and information-rich societies. A human society obviously is quite different from that there are many social animals, but none of them live the way we do. So the distinctively human traits, the traits that make us human, I think are mostly adaptations to enable us to conduct this new kind of social life, to relate to each other, to understand each other, to change our behavior to conform to abstract rules and ideas. In terms of the question of what makes us human, what sets us apart from the other animals, there are lots of social animals, but none are as thoroughly cultural as we are. Culture is a new way of being social, of sharing information, of having interactive roles that work together to get tasks done, of doing economic exchange, of passing information and knowledge on to future generations. So I assume that the distinctively human traits are pretty much all evolved adaptations to enable us to do these traits. And so free will and consciousness and the human self and all these things, I think, are specifically designed to help us relate to each other. Let me put it this way, all living things need to survive and reproduce and have motivations to do that. human beings go about surviving and reproducing in an unusual way. We do it by constructing this new kind of social life called culture, and it's worked really well for us. And you say, well, why don't other animals pick it up? They can't. The psychological requirements to do culture are quite advanced. And so we're lucky that nature managed to hit on a system that works so that we could think symbolically and share information and do all these other things. So I think free will should be understood in that way as an adaptation for human social life.